Okay, so today we're going to talk about the PetTrac and TranTrac security. Um, this is all going to be related to our move to PatTrac 3.0 and TranTrac 3.0. So yes, we will have a version of TranTrac that will be in the same model as PatTrac 3.0. So So what we're going to talk about first is authentication and access control. We're going to go over some terminology that's going to be different. Then we'll talk about what you will do and the changes in what you'll need to do. And then we'll talk about when. When is it going to happen? And then I'm going to show you a demo so you can have a visual of, of what all this is going to look like. So the first thing is authentication access control. So there are actually two separate things. There's the authentication part where we have a username and a password that we authenticate with. And then there's the access control part, which is our roles and what a user can and can't do once they are authenticated. Now, what we're trying to do is split those up more in PatTrac. So by splitting them up more, now what we'll be able to do is be able to have Google authentication or depending on where your Active Directory lives, Active Directory authentication. Um, if you use OTA or Auth0 or something like that, those may be incorporated. If say the state doesn't decide to stay with Google and use some kind of other authentication method, then we'll be able to do that. Um, so so again, we're splitting the authentication part away from the access and control part. Um, what we're going to talk about today is the changes in the access control part. Um, and what you could do, what you're going to see, and things like that. So, um, get going here. So, currently, we have what we call internally in the code system security users, right? And we have system security roles. The users, of course, is the username, password, and the roles are what roles are assigned to that user. That part's not going to change a lot because we're still going to need, at least in the interim, um, till we get rolled out, is we're going to have to authenticate those users using the standard username and passwords that we've been using in PatTrac for years. Um, what's really going to change is the roles. So in our case, we now are going to use because they're actually different objects. Um, we're going to be using a permission policy users, which go more in line with the access control than the authentication. And then we're going to have the permission policy roles, which are going to be a little bit different than what you're accustomed using. Um, if some of you used PatTrac during the pandemic, um, you you're going to see that this kind of looks familiar because we actually implemented this in PatTrac, um, and those users that use that will recognize a lot of the things that are in here. Um, so when we talk about permission policy users, permission policy roles, we're talking about the new thing as opposed to the system security users is what we've been using for years. So what's going to change? We're going to, did I go through the one role first? Oh, and then the demo at the end. So we'll take a look at all these changes in the demo. There's going to be a major change in the roles. um, the way it looks, the way we define what somebody cannot do. Um, and some of you in the past have used a role that we really didn't push, but that allowed you to basically change the user's menu um, and control actions. Um, that's going to change in these new roles. It's done completely different. Um, One of the things the new roles have is they have explicit denied. So meaning that in the past, we would either give a user access to read, write, whatever, but now we can give users explicit deny to a particular objects, change, add, navigate. Um, and then the new menu control will allows us to remove items from the menu. Note that you can give users access to an object, but if you've removed it from the menu, they'll never be able to access and control it. So if we add a new feature, um, we give users access to that new feature, the object that new feature uses. If you've gone in there and changed your menu um, to remove the menu, uh, like our menu group, they may not be able to see that object. So that's something to be aware of. Um, and then the new action controls, we get a lot of this where, we have users where, let's say, for instance, in a purchase order, we never want them to be able to approve a purchase order. That's kind of handled in code now, but um, in other objects, um, we we kind of leave it open, and then this will allow you to say, okay, this user or this group cannot do this particular action. And then the last thing we're going to talk about is switching the security action and when you should run it. So, and we'll do that as a part of the demo. Okay, so let's go to the demo. Okay, so right now I am running existing PatTrac 2.0. And if you go to administration and security, you'll see that we have users and roles, which is what we've been working with for years. But if you'll notice at the bottom, we have application users, permission policy users, and permission policy roles. Those are all new things based on the new security. PatTrac 2.0 is not actually using those, but these are here so that you can work with them prior to us using that. Now, why are we doing this now? Well, we sent out an update, say, hey, why don't everybody update their usernames to use their email address in anticipation of being able to use Google authentication to do the authentication part. But in order to do that, we need to have these permission policies. Our intention is to let you use the beta of 3.0 alongside the existing PatTrac 2.0. Okay, so you can have some users be able to test it, play around with it, not play around with it because you're using your actual data, but to be able to access 3.0 and still fall back on 2.0 to do stuff. In order to do that, we need application users, permission policy users, and permission policy roles set up. Okay. And then you can use both. One of the things that you can do, we've added in here, is that if you're looking at your users, under tools, there is now a convert security. Now, what convert security is going to do, it's going to look at all your users and it's going to create both an application user and a permission policy user. It creates both. Okay, and we'll talk a little bit more about why we have two, but it'll create both. It'll move all your current users into permission. It's not going to move them. It's still going to leave them in users, but it's going to create them. Okay. The convert security will also look at all your roles and will create permission policy roles to match the roles you've already had defined. Okay. So you don't have to recreate the roles to use PatTrac 3.0. If you run this twice, you will only get the new users that have been added to PatTrac will be put here. The old users, the users that you previously converted, are still going to be there. The roles will get updated. Okay. So that way, if you make a change to a role for one reason or another, it's going to be able to update those permission policy roles to what is currently in the roles section. Okay. So that's that convert policy. We'll talk at the end about when you should do it and all that good stuff. But know that just because I run that, you're not using it at this point, not until you get 3.0. Or, you know, if everybody were to do it, I could release a version of 2.0 that used the new security, but I don't want to have two different versions of PatTrac 2.0. It would have to be everybody did it and everybody was ready to go with it. One of the things that gotta let somebody else in here. One of the things that will happen when you convert the users is that their password is going to get reset. Okay, it's going to get reset to a default password that we'll provide with everybody, so that the users know they need to change it when they log in for the first time. The reason we don't move their password is because the permission policy user security and authentication are going to use a different and more modern password hashing. Okay. So we're going to secure that password differently than we did before. So therefore, we can't convert existing passwords. We're going to have to create new passwords when we roll out 3.0 for the first time. And then their password will stay within there. Okay. So if you look at a role, this is a user, existing user, that basically has a name and all the roles that they're in. That's what you're used to. When you look at a permission policy user, and I look at the same one, it doesn't look any different. It doesn't look any different, but the roles here are now permission policy roles as opposed to up here, the roles are the old system security roles. So they look the difference. But what is different is that you'll never create permission policy users. Okay. In 3.0 and in the convert security, we will create an application user which actually has embedded a permission policy user. Now, this may seem a little confusing. Why would we put that additional layer in there? Again, this is the interim layer to our authentication, whereas this application user is where it's what the user is actually using. Although when you look at one of these, right now in 2.0, they don't look any different. But in PatTrac 3.0, they look a lot different. And before we get into the roles, I tell you what, I'm going to give you an idea of what they look like. So I'm going to, everybody should be able to see, we are now looking at the application users in 3.0. So in 3.0, what you'll notice when you get to use 3.0, you'll notice this is the application user. They'll be tied to the employee, okay? But when you use it in 3.0, there's a lot of things that are different. You still have the username, which you see in PatTrac 2.0, and you have the roles, which are just the same as you have them. But what you don't have is you don't have the login info. So at this point, I've authenticated through PatTrac 3.0 through Google as my login provider, and you could see it saves the key. Normal users will not be able to see this information. Administrators will, because if something gets screwed up and I need to delete my Google authentication or any other authentication method, I can do that from here. A couple other things that are going to be different. If I use Google authentication, it just brings over my Google picture. But in that case, there's a few other things that are going to change. Currently, in PatTrac 2.0, we store their current clinic and their current location. We store that in the employee record. So everybody's got to be able to read their employee record in order to do that. In 3.0, we're moving that out of the employee record and we're moving it into this application user. Okay. At this point in 2.0, if you look at an application user, you don't have those fields. We will probably, when we're ready to give you the beta, we will probably move those fields for you in a script so that they'll be there for the current users. But they'll be able to go in there and change certain things. The employee fields now have the existing username, but then they also will have an application user. We will assign the application user to the employee, and then as a fallback, we'll have the system security for the actual application user. So we've added that application user as the difference that we're going to use here in PatTrac 3.0. Okay. All right. So now, so this permission policy, yet, like I said, you'll never have to do it because when you create a new application user, it automatically creates this layer for you. We kind of stuck it in there so you could actually, I could explain exactly what's going on here, but in most cases, you'll never interact with the permission policy user. You'll do it right from the application users and be able to assign their roles. Okay. So now let's talk about roles. The roles are what's really different in PatTrac 3.0. And we'll open up a role here. We still have users. We still have type permissions. We still have we have a do and different navigation permissions, and then our denied use actions. So if we go back and look at a role in 2.0 as it is now, we go to type permissions, and when you look at it, we basically had this checkbox. You can read this, you can write this, create this, delete this. Now, In 2.0, this is 3.0 is going to be a little bit different. So now what's going to happen is um, when I go to permissions, instead of a checkbox saying you can read this, write this, create this, delete this, or navigate through this, you can either allow or deny, or just leave it blank, leave it neither. If you leave it neither, the new roles now have this permission policy: deny all by default, or allow all by default, or read only by default. So when you create a role, you'll be able to take this role and say, okay, deny these by default. Everything's denied except the stuff that I allow. In this case, you could say allow all by default, except for the explicit ones I put here, and read only by default. Okay. So if it's blank, it's going to follow what's up here in the permission policy for the role. But now I can take these roles and then I can go in here, and unlike without the checkboxes, I can allow or deny. In this case, I can deny that, which is already explicitly done. But if the role was top row was different, I can change that. Okay. Just only because there's some confusion. Of course, you can read the record if you have read access. I can write to the record if I have write access. I can create a new record uh, if I have access, and I can delete it if I have access. I can navigate. Now, there's some confusion about navigate. I can deny access in the navigate. What's going to happen is basically on the list view where we have a navigation item that allows you to look at zip codes, you're just not going to see it. Kind of like an automatic menu change, in that if I don't have navigate permission in that particular object, then I just don't even see it on the menu. So this was the way we would do it in old PatTrac, in PatTrac 2.0. The member permissions and the object permissions, where you can go in there and create new criteria, that is all the same, except for the fact that now, instead of, once you set your criteria, once you've set your criteria, you basically, instead of checking boxes, you either allow or deny. That is no different than what we've been doing for years in PatTrac. Okay. And then same thing with member permissions, where we're set and certain members have certain things. All that's the same, except for, the allow and deny objects. Now, one of the things is different is that you'll notice up here, I allowed read, I denied write. And I denied delete. I have to check into that. But your options will be down there at the bottom. Okay. So that part, these parts really haven't changed, other than instead of checkboxes now, we have the read, write, create, and deny. Okay. So that's really no different. Again, you're going to change these objects. You're going to add to a role just like you did before. I'm going to add a new type permission to this role. You select the new button, you select your object. And take it. And then I select whether I want to allow people to read those, allow those, and then allow that, deny that, and navigate, allow. And then, of course, I can set my object permissions to only be allowed in this object to see and or edit or change objects that I create. So, um, and that's no different than what we have in 2.0 there. So if I add it, then it's going to be added to the list. Okay, so let's talk about navigation permissions. Navigation permissions are just things to navigate, change the navigate. So I can go in here and I can say for all users, I can take, this is my menu as it stands right now. And I can take I find a menu option. Boom, boom, there's my clinic. That bigger. And let's say I don't want the query. I can allow or deny object to this menu heading query. So I can just do menu. If I don't want to make billing, I can deny billing access. So it's not denying access to the actual data object. It's basically just removing it over here in this navigation pane in PatTrac. Okay. So that's what the navigation items do. Just allow you to, when I basically say allow and deny, allow it lets me see it. If I deny it, it hides it. Okay. That's basically how the navigation items work. And our denied actions, this one is a little bit different in that, so my actions are defined here. I have to pick an action. Some of the actions have cryptic names, but so for instance, I don't want this person to be able to add lab tests. Okay. In this role, we're looking at the role, and and then I save and close. So this basically is everything's denied. This is all the actions we want to deny for this group. Okay, so you can add the actions there. There's no giving access to an action. You only can take away access to an action. So in that case, that's how that works. Now, I know some of you are going to ask, if you use the roles and you use the roles that had the old way, it did not work well in my mind. The old way, if you had found it in old PatTrac, the navigation permissions or action denials, they will not convert to the new security system. So if you want to change the navigation permissions, then you're going to have to recreate those in 2.0. But one thing to keep in mind that, if I don't have access to an object, it never shows up on the menu. Okay. If I don't have access to an object, access to that object will never show up on the menu. Okay. These are cases where, hey, I've got a menu item that may show reports under environmental health or a dashboard under environmental health, and I just want to remove it. Users may have access to reports and they may have access to dashboards, but they aren't necessarily going to be using those. So in that case, you can use the navigation permissions for that, but just don't expect when we convert security to have those instances in the roles where you use the old way that was kind of hidden, to be converted over to the new way. Okay. So now that's pretty much everything on the roles and permissions. Now I basically just wanted to talk about when you want to do this. Um, most of you, most of you already have the update that under users, if you go to the user list, go to tools, have this button called convert security. Um, if you have that, you can certainly do it. It's going to create those right now. Um, but know that only new users will be added if you click it again, but these will get updated. So you can run it periodically when you know you added uh, new users. Once you've done users, you can, if I go here, I'm going to go into personnel, um, and I'm going to just go to a dummy one here. This one must have a lot of stuff. You'll notice in personnel, this was the old username that they used, but now we have this application user. This is in those that have the security, switch security update. They will see this now in personnel. This list, of course, will not populate until you've created those application users. Okay. We do not update the personnel records with the users that we've created. Okay. You'll have to assign the application user once they've been created through um, the switch security option. Okay. But this is now where we're going to actually have this new security will be under application user. Okay. So when are we going to do this? It's entirely up to you. You can do it now and play around with the new security to get familiar with it. Uh, know that it will not be available until we give you access to PatTrac 3.0. Okay. Um, we hope to, by the end of October, release a version that you can play around with. I mean, you could actually use. Um, the majority of things work perfectly fine in 3.0, whether you're using the web version or the Windows version of 3.0. The Windows version of 3.0 doesn't look a lot different than what we have in 2.0 now, other than it's using this new data model in the background. Um, so you'll have to do it before you want to test PatTrac 3.0. Okay. Um, there are a couple things that when we move to 3.0, I don't know if you remember reading the update notice that in the beta we'd have everything but Clinic. Um, and that kind of still holds true for some things, but not all things. Um, there are a few things we need to change when we move to 3.0, specifically for the scheduler. Okay. But other than that, basically it's just going to be a script we run. And then after we run it, it'll actually do both. Now, what's not going to be in 3.0 when we roll out the beta is that our intention when we log out, when we log in, of course, this is not going to do, well, maybe let's just do, oh, you know what? I can do it this way. Do in private. What's not going to be in the beta version that we release in October is that when you go to a login screen, we will be showing the agency above the username, where the user will select the agency they're going to select. So this would be a generic PatTrac 3 login. The user will select the agency and either their Google or username and password, and then it will use their installation. For the web version, we're going to have different installations until we get the single sign-in for an agency implemented. And that'll probably be sometime between, the initial beta release in October till the first of the year sometime, where we'll be able to go in there and just have one login. Our intention is to, instead of having 21 separate instances of PatTrac 3 running in the web, to actually have one instant running that we can scale better, so that, depending on each agency and how much it's getting utilized, it will scale the application as opposed to having 21 different instances that have to be scaled individually. So that's the difference there. But that won't be in this PatTrac. Okay. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and open this up for questions. So if you have a question, you want to ask somebody again, you can either unmute and ask the question or throw it into the chat and we'll answer the question.
Hey, Michael, I've got a question. This is Jeremiah.
Uh-huh.
And for other listeners, I work at the Garrett County Health Department. I may have missed it because I've was interrupted a couple of times, but did you say the roles will carry over into the new?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
All the roles, when we convert to security, we're going to convert the roles and also convert any object permissions or member permissions that are currently in that roles. They'll all move over.
Okay, and the allow will just take place of the checkbox and all that fun stuff. So they'll look pretty much as identical.
Correct, except
Cool.
You're allowing the denying versus checking a box.
Yeah. And then the second one was, if we click on that convert security now, is it going to mess anything up?
No, actually it won't. You see, you've converted now, it's just going to populate the data down here. And you'll be able to look at it, play around with it, take a look at the permissions, how they're different or whatever. You could do that now. And that will be a prerequisite for you being able to use the beta version of 3.0.
Cool. Thanks.
One thing I didn't mention is if you're using PatTrac, and I don't know if most of you know, we originally were not going to do a 3.0 version of PatTrac, but now we will be doing a 3.0 version of PatTrac. Currently in the PatTrac installations, we don't have this convert security button, but we do have these, but we don't have the convert security, but we'll be adding that in an upcoming release of PatTrac for you to be able to test PatTrac 3.0. So, okay, we got a question from John. Does a deny always override and allow a permission? Absolutely. So that was the kind of, if you think about the existing roles, we could allow something for somebody else and not put it for somewhere else. If I allow something in one role, I allow a user to access something, but in a different role, I deny that user access. Unlike before, where we just left it blank, it was an explicit denial. Now, if I explicitly deny it in a role, then the deny will override and allow permission. And let me just clarify that real quick. So if I look at a role, um, so the permission policy does not deny all by default. This is not the same thing as an explicit denial. Okay. The explicit denial is when I go into an object and I explicitly put in, I'm going to deny create rights. This will override another role's allow access, which that's a little bit different than what the old ones did, but this is now with an explicit denial. So hopefully that answers your question. So the answer is yes, it will override it.
Thanks.
Uh-huh. So another thing for those of you that actually print out reports for audit purposes of security, we're going to have to provide you with different reports because the existing reports are only based on the old security. We'll provide different reports that actually show auditors or whoever needs it the permissions based on the new policy. Okay. Any other questions? Give you a few seconds to. Okay.
So what happens? Excuse me.
Okay,
So what happens if you don't do the convert? There's that convert button. What happens if you don't press that and you roll out PatTrac 3.0?
You'll never be able to access 3.0 beta
until you hit the convert button. All right.
Yeah. The convert's going to create those new policies and roles that the PatTrac 3.0 is only using. PatTrac 3.0 cannot use the old security users in roles. Cannot use them. Yep.
I just clicked the button and I got a couple of errors, validation errors. It says members cannot be empty, criteria must not be empty.
Yep, you've got a role that's messed up. If you go to the roles, you probably have a blank line on a role. If everybody remembers correctly in roles, you may want to go back in there and look at your roles before you start. But under type permissions, if you sort by object, if you got any blank lines at the top, which are objects that we no longer have in PatTrac 2.0, go ahead and delete those objects before you do the convert. So just review those roles before you convert. Basically, the problem is you have some empty objects and you can safely just delete those since we're not using them.
Cool.
Now,
thanks.
I know in some cases that we've done in other organizations, and you would get that same error message if you went to that role and tried to modify the role. It would let you know, hey, there's an object without a type, so you can just delete them there. Most people that have those haven't found them yet, but if you review your roles, you'll be able to find them. Okay. Anything else? Lee says, I do not have the convert button on new users, my security users. This is in the most current update. If your installation doesn't have the most current update, then it'll be in the next update. So Yeah, so that'll be in the next update if you don't have it. Okay. Okay, anything else? Okay, so we're going to call it at this point, and I'm going to send out an update message, an update thing. If you guys aren't subscribed yet, go to updates.pattrac.net.info and subscribe, and you'll get an automatic email that's got any updates. Plus, it'll have the link to the webinar today. So, okay, so I appreciate all of you that showed up today, and if you have any questions, feel free to send in a support ticket, and we'll answer those or help you along. And then those of you who are ready to play around with 3.0, we can put you on the list for toward the end of October to be able to have access to that. So, all right, very good. So
Thanks for doing this.
All right, no problem. All right, everybody have a great day. All right.
You too.
All right, bye.